Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome everybody to Morris Talk Live 100. I'm your host, Tarhaka Omana LB, and we got a lot of ground to cover this evening. The title of tonight's broadcast is Numbers, Psychology, Contracts, and Law. We're going to try to do the best we can and cover it all. I have some documents that I'm going to go through for you. But first of all, I want to let you know that we're going to convert this over into a video. Once you get over there on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to my channel. You can give us a thumbs up, a thumbs down, or you can give us a comment or whatever. But participate in what we're doing because we're trying to spread this kind of information to people so that we can learn it, so that we can use it. The chat room is wide open. Please be respectable up in there, if you would. Before we go any further and get down into the broadcast, let me state that we're going to be dealing with the following questions. What is the psychology of law? Why are numbers in relationships important? What are the laws of power? What do powerless people talk about? What is this? What is a psychopath? What is that? What is a poverty mindset? What does race have to do with power? Does multiculturalism benefit you, benefit the Moors? Okay, because I don't know nothing about no Negro, colored, and black. I don't know nothing about no African Americans. I don't know nothing about a race of people called black people, illegally or lawfully, a race of people called black people, or African American, or Negro, or colored, black. I don't know nothing about that. That's strange to me. When I hear that, it's quite extraordinary. But anyway, we're going to get down into this broadcast tonight, and we're going to open up all this stuff. But right now, I'm going to go to a commercial break, and when we come back, we're going in. Y'all hold on a minute.
Today in September 2023, the United States is bringing up the student loan thing again, just like I said they would in 2022. And a lot of people took no action back then. They advertised they would give you a loan to go to school, but you don't receive a check. But anyway, you go for it. The next thing you know, you get a bill in the mail for a loan they said they gave you. And guess what? It has interest attached to it. And as time goes on, it gets bigger and bigger because it was never meant to be paid off. It was designed for you to pay for the rest of your natural life. Get my free report. Go to tarhakadebtelimination.org. That's tarhakadebtelimination.org. Become a creditor instead of a debtor. Get into private. Get out of the public. Peace.
All right, we're back. Now, the first thing I want to go down into is the psychology of law. And keep in mind, it's very important for you to understand, and I've said this over and over and over on previous broadcasts, but I'm going to say it again one more time. And this time I'm going to explain it to you, because I don't think y'all understand this. The United States does not interfere with your right to make contracts. The average everyday individual, it doesn't matter whether you own a business or you don't own a business, the United States doesn't interfere with your right to make contracts. That's universal. Okay? You got the light bill people that send you a light bill, the mortgage company, the bank, they send you a statement. Those are their contracts. And what we have a habit of doing is when we get these contracts from all of these different people, at the courtroom, they send you somewhere, you got the, you under we're obligating you to do this, that, and the other, perform this, that, and the other. That's their contract. That's not your contract, that's their contract. So what we have to do is we have to formulate our own contracts. It could be a printed contract, it could be a verbal contract, there's all types of contracts. I want you to go online and type in the different types of contracts available to you inside the United States. But tonight we're talking about printed contracts. We're going to try to keep this as simple as it can and master the art of formulating your own contracts and send your contracts the other way. You understand? I don't want to get all down into this because I done told you this right here a long time ago. As a matter of fact, tonight I'm going to give you some examples because we're dealing with what is the psychology of law. We're coming up under the heading of that particular banner. So we're going to deal with some of this right here this evening. Okay? All right, so y'all hold on a minute. Let me bring this here up, and let me see what I got right here. First of all, okay, all right, I got one that's called You Funded Your Loan. I want you to think about this for a minute. When a bank extends credit for a credit card or a mortgage, is your credit not theirs? Say this one more time. When a bank extends credit for a credit card or a mortgage, is your credit not theirs? Now, why is that? The United States filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 1933, took us off the real money standard, which is silver and gold, and they're operating in the bankruptcy today, so they're printing money out of thin air. That's right, I said it. And if the guys on the floor of the Senate and the Congress can say it, I feel like I can say it too. I'm just reminding my people of what's going on. Okay? Banks do not loan their customers deposits. That is against the law. A lot of us are under the impression when people make a deposit in the bank, and they say we got a savings account, $10,000, and I got a checking account for $15,000, $20,000. Or somebody else that you don't even know comes along, and the bank gives them a loan of $30,000. You think, well, they probably used some of my money. No, that is against the law. Okay, they can't do that. All right, let's roll. Banks do not loan their customers deposits or their bank reserves. Instead, they record your credit as a bank liability on the private side of the ledger, which is hidden from you, and as a bank asset on the public side of the ledger, which is visible, and that's what you see. Just like the mafia, the banks have 2 sets of books. Okay, but now think about it for a minute now. The mafia is able to do this right here and get away with it because they got killers and guns. The United States is able to do it and get away with it, got killers and guns. Now, let's say you open up a bank and you try to do, oh no, you're going to jail. We don't know you got nobody know, we don't know how many guns, you ain't got no guns. And you can't enforce nothing. You ain't got no Navy, Air Force, no military, you don't know how to make explosives. You can't even fire high-power rifle spray. But anyway, let's go. All right. A common misconception taught in some economic textbooks is that commercial banks function as intermediaries, lending their customers deposits whenever the bank makes a loan. This deception has been exposed by money reformers advocating sovereign money issuance, supported by ample evidence and ultimately confirmed by the administrators of the Bank of England in their first quarterly bulletin of 2014. The Bank of England first quarterly bulletin of 2014. Go get that and take a look at it. Whenever a bank makes a loan, it simultaneously creates a matching deposit in the borrower's bank account, thereby creating new money. Bank of England Quarterly Bulletin 2014, question 1. And the links are there for you to get, have this document in my possession. Because of this instant money creation process, it has been said that banks create money out of thin air. But bank credit has value in the real economy. So where does the value come from? There's only one thing the loan manager in a commercial bank wants from a customer: their signature. Isn't this amazing? You go in a bank, the mortgage company tells you, well, congratulations, the bank is going to give you the loan, give you a set of documents that you're going to sign. You take it to the bank and give it to the bank. The bank said, well, we've been expecting you. They told us you was going to come. You have your documents. Here's your documents. The bank gets the documents, take them in the back, bring you a whole other set of documents for you to sign, and then congratulate you on having your new house. But remember, the people that got you to sign on the first page told you the bank was going to give you a loan. But when you walk out the bank, you carry a couple of documents with you, but you ain't got no check. Anyway, y'all got to forgive me for laughing because I go through this so many times, and I've been preaching this so long. And I'm going to go from that and going on down to the next thing, because I have something else to say in regards to this to this information. Okay. All right. Now let's go on to the next thing. What have we got right now? Let's see. All right. Okay. Now you remember I told you that the United States doesn't interfere with your right to make contracts. All right. So here's what I've done. Keep in mind, and I've done this in 2021. After I did it, I made it a public record. It's on my blog. post. It's there. I put it on Facebook. You can't copy this verbatim. Don't do that. This is personal information, but you can get the gist of what I'm talking about and create your own because you have the right to make contracts. Okay? It says on number 1, non-negotiable common law copyright notice. All rights are hereby reserved with regard to common law copyright of trade names, trademarks, as well as any and all derivatives and variations in the spelling of said trade names, trademarks belonging to Tarhaka of the family base, which shall include without limitation all usernames, handles, uses in his online activities. Said names may neither be used nor reproduced, neither in whole nor in part, nor in any manner whatsoever without the prior express written consent and acknowledgement of copyrighted Tarhaka of the family base, hereafter known as a secured party. Now I'm going to stop right there. Now I've been telling you what a secured party is and a creditor and all of that there. But let's go down here and take a look at something. For those of you who have been through some things, okay, pay attention because this is in my contract. And this contract is a public record, and you can send this to the sheriff, you can send it to the governor, you can send it to the Senate, you can send it anywhere I want to send it. It says on number 5, common law copyright is also claimed by secured party over any and all means of identification of his person, defined as all fingerprints, footprints, palm prints, thumbprints, handprints, toe prints, RNA materials, DNA materials, blood, and blood fractions by species. Okay, hold on a minute, I ain't through with this one. Surgically remove tissue, body parts, organs, hair, teeth, nails, semen, urine, feces, excrement, other body fluids in a matter of any kind, and breath samples, voice print, retinal images, and the description thereof, and all other corporeal identification factors and said factors, physical counterparts, and any body tissues of any kind in any form, and all records and record numbers, including results, recorded or otherwise, of all and any test performed on any material related to his name and information pertaining thereto, as well as any visual image, photographic or electronic, notwithstanding any and all claims to the contrary. Okay? That's my contract. All right. So I wanted you to understand that if the United States does not interfere with your right to make contracts, you can learn how to create your own contract and send stuff the other way and make your contracts enforceable. Just like the people who say, well, if you don't pay us based on the contract that we have with you for your lights and water, we're going to cut your lights and water off, right? If you don't pay the phone bill based on the contract we have with you, we're going to cut your phone off. If we don't have, if you don't honor the contract we have with you for the gas company, we're going to cut your gas off. If you want to know how to be free and relaxed and not to be concerned about having to pay a car payment, all you have to do is miss a trouble. Get as free as you want to be. They enforce their contract, so what I'm trying to get you to do is create your own and enforce your contract. Okay? All right. Now, this is just part 1. Keep in mind, and we're going to convert this and put it over there on YouTube. And so let me go on to the next thing that we're going to be dealing with here this evening is we're going to be dealing with, let me see, talk about the law. Let's talk about the difference between believing in something and knowing something for a fact and can prove it. There's a difference. You see, belief is not knowing. Belief is not education. Belief is just belief. That's something you believe in. I have been told by people, they say, well, John prayed for you. That's why nothing happened to you. Okay, that's what John believes. Because John tell me what he know for a fact about the mechanics of the prayer that he did for me. I don't want to hear nothing. Don't tell me nothing about the Bible. I'm talking about what you know for a fact. Give me the knowledge. Give me the education. Give me the mechanics. Give me the citizens. Give me the language. Give me the statistics. Give me everything. Give me that. Don't tell me nothing about what you believe. Because I know for a fact what we should be doing is dealing what we know for a fact, and we can prove. We got to cut this thing out. Well, I believe in Jesus. Okay, I have questions. Who and what is Jesus? Let's use mathematics for a minute. We got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Then we got A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. 9 numbers, 9 alphabets. But somebody come along to try to introduce something called 10. And when they got to the alphabet, they came up with this thing called J. They took the I, the same I, with a dot over the top, drew a line and put a hook on the bottom and called it a J. Now we can bring in all kind of stuff. We can bring in a name called Jesus, and John, and Joseph, and Jeremiah, and James, and Jessica, and Jonah, and all this right here, who was just created yesterday. You see, prior to the 2,000 years ago, how could it be somebody named James or John or Jesus when the alphabet hadn't been created? They hadn't stolen the information and fabricated and falsified it and came up with some garbage for you to believe in. But I didn't do no believing. I started dealing with what I know for a fact, and I did an investigation. Okay, let's roll on past that. Let's start dealing with what we think. Because you go to the barbershop, and people in the barbershop, they talk about other people. You go in the hairdresser, ladies go to the hairdresser and talk about other people. Well, people who are powerful people, they talk about business. They don't talk about other people. They talk about business and investments and stuff like that. And I wonder, is it possible for my people to hold a conversation with me about the stock market and investing without bringing up one religious term? So far as I got was in 15 minutes. I can't get 30 minutes out of them before they say, well, God said, with Jesus, thank you, Jesus. No, we're talking about investing. We're talking about real estate. We're talking about gold, silver. We're talking about international banking. We're talking about offshore banking. We're talking about all of this kind of stuff. Could you kind of keep the religion on the down low? Rich people talk about powerful things. People with a poverty mindset talk about other people. You got to be careful with that. It'll take practice. It's 10 times harder to unlearn error than it is to learn new truth. I'm going to say it again. It is 10 times harder to unlearn error than it is to unlearn new truth. Now, let's get on down here because we got some misconceptions about racism. Let's get it right one more time. We're gonna get it right now. It ain't gonna last but a few minutes. But I'm gonna let the man who knows for a fact come in and tell you one more time. Okay? Hold on.
We got 3 years ago before we go into it. 3 years ago, before you're going to see massive suicides happening. Because you don't even understand what racism is. I've gone all around the world. Even when I was with President Carter in the White House, I had to take trade missions in the third world nations, in Africa, Latin America, the Middle East. And invariably, wherever I spoke, I would ask people, do you know what racism is? I would even offer $1,000 for a person to tell me what racism is. I still got black folks today who don't even know what racism is. They talk about it. Find me one that understands what racism is. Every time I ask them, what's racism? Well, Dr. Anderson, racism is not liking somebody. It's prejudice. It's bigotry. It's hatred. No, it's not. Racism is a competitive relationship between groups of people that are competing for the ownership and control of wealth and resources and power. That's what racism is. Racism is a group phenomenon. Racism is a team sport. You cannot participate in racism if you don't play as a team. You can't correct it. You're not even in the game. Racism is like football, basketball, and baseball. You play as a team or you lose. And I got all these so-called educated blacks in America on TV, heading up civil rights organizations, getting elected to public office. Don't you understand what racism is? That's why they don't do anything. They go there and tell you, well, I'm in a public office, I'm a mayor or governor. My thing is to make sure everybody get along. That's not affecting racism. Nobody asked you to get elected to office and make people get along. Now, racism never existed on the earth until the 1400s. Never had it. There was no such thing as racism. You had people, for instance, who had practiced various forms of discrimination. We even had slavery. But to be enslaved prior to the 1400s was for only three reasons. Either you were a victim of a religious persecution, or you had some indebtedness and was enslaved, or you were a prisoner of war. Those are the only three reasons you could be enslaved until the 1400s. About 1442, when Magellan, he went around, Henry the Navigator rather, went around the coast of Africa and picked up about 16 blacks and brought them back in 1442 and gave them to the Pope as gifts. And those slaves worked around the Vatican in Italy from 1442 and about 1488. And it became a good thing to have all these blacks working free around the Vatican and in the Pope space. No labor to be paid for. Other people wanted those advantages. So Pope Pius put out a public edict. Pope Innocent put out a public edict saying, look, if you want some slaves, go get some, but get black folk. He put out a public edict saying, if you're going to enslave anybody, enslave black people. And once that hit, all of a sudden everybody got interested in getting slaves. And that started the whole movement in 1488 and 1489.
All right, we're back. There you go. Now you know what racism is. Again, you got to make sure you understand it. It ain't got nothing to do with, well, you know, he hate me because of this, that. Well, he may be prejudiced against you or stuff, but that's not what racism is. So if we run out of some of this, you know, somebody get killed and here come all the parents, we got to stop this racism. Well, racism is a competitive relationship between two groups of people. Well, one group has so much power they can subjugate another group and suppress another group. So what we have to do is start dealing with group economics. We got to stop doing the same thing that we've been failing with year after year and year, and come up with a whole new type of thinking. That's what we got to do. This is why I'm doing this broadcast here tonight. One more time. And this is the part where I'm coming back. I ain't doing this kind of business. I'm going to another commercial. Yo, Lord.
Hi, I'm Tarhaka. You know, there's a difference between what you believe and what you know for a fact and can prove. I live in the private and can prove it. I've exercised my freedom of right to travel and can prove it. I don't have a mortgage and can prove it. And much, much more. And so does many other people across this country and abroad who are secured party and creditors living in the private. Debt is a burden. It causes people a hard time in life. They can't live live in peace fast enough. Contact me at TarhakaDebtElimination.org. You can call me and I'll answer the phone. Leave your email information on my website and get my free report. That's TarhakaDebtElimination.org. Get out of debt. It's nothing but a burden. You can't move forward with that. That's a bunch of junk.
All right, we're back. Now, we're going back to belief versus knowing. And I want you to think about this for a minute. Because when you was a child, you didn't know nothing about religion until somebody took you somewhere and introduced you to it. All you know is everything that you believe was within you. I remember when we used to be throwing rocks with children. I throw a rock, and I know the other guy next to me, he going to throw a rock, but I would always come up with an excuse. I throw a rock and throw it as hard as I could, and then I tell him, well, you know, I throw that rock, but it still wasn't all of my might because I believed there was something else inside of myself. Now, if you get an orange or grapefruit or tangerine or some fruit or vegetable, they all have the same thing in common. All of the seeds that will produce more fruit is within the fruit. An orange has the seed within the orange. Apples have seeds that are within the apple. Think about that for a minute. And that's the way it was when you was a child. Only thing you knew is what you wanted. If you didn't get what you want, you just disappointed. If you was a real little bitty baby, in order for you to get what you want, you know how to holler until you get what you want. But everything was internal. You were using what you had to get what you wanted. There was no external, nothing that you were using, no mechanism that you were using. You up 2 o'clock in the morning, you see Granny walk by that doorway, you start hollering because you want Granny to come in there and pick you up. But one day, somebody took you by the hand and took you into a religious synagogue and start teaching you how to believe in something outside of yourself. You got to stop believing in you. You got to believe in what we tell you over here on the side with a picture on the wall that don't even look like you. Now you confused and you trying to make adjustments because you know that mom and dad is not trying to lead you wrong. Why would they do that to me? You know, if you see, if you don't know no better, you can't do better. But once you know better, then you can start doing better. You bring everything under investigation. When they came out with the coronavirus, okay, we're going to do an investigation. When they came out with cancer, I don't know nothing about that, but later on we started doing an investigation. Poor health, we started doing an investigation. Arthritis, we started doing an investigation. But what we found out is a lot of the patients that had these problems, they had another problem. They was depending on something outside of themselves to believe in instead of accepting the fact and learning how to deal with what they know for a fact and they can prove and start doing some research and actually do what they got to do in order to get rid of the problem that they got. See, the hospitals are not in the healing business. The pharmaceutical industry is not in the healing business. They're all in the money-making business. Your brain is inside of you. Your bones are inside of you. Your voice is inside of you. Your veins, your sinews, your tissues, your blood, your plasma, all of that's inside of you until somebody somebody takes you by the hand and convince you that you need to forget about that and start focusing on something outside of you, now you're in trouble. Okay, that's enough of that. Now, what we're going to deal with, let's go back to this racism thing again. This time we're going to deal with race and power. Does race have anything to do with power? Okay, let's take a look and see what's going on with that. Race and power. Let's see.
But perhaps the best example of how European ethnics would finally gain the full benefits of whiteness came with an innovation in housing at the end of World War II. It was a time when hundreds of thousands of GIs came home ready to start families, but had no place to live.
Living space was at a premium. In the Bronx, they tried building Quonset huts, and they turned to slums. All the Quonset huts had just disintegrated. There were two families sharing a hut. One family at one end, one family at the other, and before you know it, they were awful.
FHA came to the rescue by ensuring long-term, low monthly payment mortgage loans.
Veterans needed homes for families. They turned to a revolutionary New Deal housing program. It would racialize housing, wealth, and opportunity for decades in ways few could have imagined.
In the 1930s, the federal government created the Federal Housing Administration, whose job it was to provide loans, or the backing for loans, to average Americans so they could purchase a home.
Due to the stimulation of the National Housing Act, from every section of the country come reports of vastly...
In order to purchase a house in America prior to 1930s, you had to pay 50% of the sales price up front. The new terms of purchasing a home was that you put 10% or 20% down, and the bank financed 80% of it, not over 5 years, but over 30 years at relatively low rates. This opened up the opportunities for Americans to own homes like ever before. The average person could own that home.
If these terms sound familiar, they should, because this is essentially the same financing scheme that allows most Americans to own their homes today. Federal programs and banks sank millions into the home construction industry. Their message to veterans: you can afford a new home. Buy a new home now. On the outskirts of Baltimore, Memphis, Chicago, Los Angeles, Denver, and other cities, brand new communities sprang up. One of the most famous was a Long Island potato field, transformed into 17,000 new homes. It was called Levittown. Tax dollars helped make the single-family home a mass-produced consumer item. The American dream had a new name: suburbia.
You have to remember the people who came here in 1947, 1948 were young ex-GIs whose uppermost concern was taking advantage of the GI Bill and making things better for themselves.
Before moving to Levittown, Herb Callisman and his wife Doris lived in a cramped attic apartment in New York City.
And when we began to look for an apartment, we found that the apartments were $100, $125, $150 a month. I know that's unbelievable today, but it was too expensive for us. And out here in Levittown, the mortgage payments were $65 a month.
They say your kitchen dazzles every eye. A brand new sink, a built-in oven, a new refrigerator, and a...
If you were buying a Levitt home in 1947, 48, 49, 50, and 51, you would get, this would be your kitchen. You would get a GE stove, GE refrigerator, and a Bendix wash machine. It would be part of the real estate.
We came to Levittown and we found the model house, and we walked in and we looked around, and of course in the eyes of a young man who was raised in the ghetto, so to speak, it was an interesting experience, interesting lifestyle, seeing all the new modern conveniences, very fascinating.
Eugene Burnett came home with almost 1 million other black GIs. They had fought for the country in segregated ranks. They returned hoping for equality and the American dream. For many, that dream was a new home for little money down and some of the easiest credit terms in history.
I went up to the salesman. We're interested in your home. We're interested in buying one. And what is the procedure? Is there an application to be filled out? So forth. So he looked at me, looked around, and he said to me, he says, listen, it's not me, but the owners of this development have not as yet decided to sell these homes to Negroes.
It was as though it wasn't real. You can't imagine. But for someone to come out and actually tell you that they can't sell to you, you know, I was really on an up. Man, look at this house. Can you imagine having this? And then for them to tell me because of the color of my skin, I can't be a part of it.
The FHA underwriters warned that the presence of even 1 or 2 non-white families could undermine real estate values in the new suburbs. These government guidelines were widely adopted by private industry. Race had long played a role in local real estate practices. Starting in the 1930s, government officials institutionalized a national appraisal system where race was as much a factor in real estate assessment as the condition of the property. Using this scheme, federal investigators evaluated 239 cities across the country for financial risk.
So that those communities that were all white, suburban, and far away from minority areas, they received the highest rating, and that was the color green. Those communities that were all minority or in the process of changing, they got the lowest rating, and the color red. They were redlined. As a consequence, most of the mortgages went to suburbanizing America, and it suburbanized it racially.
The racial logic adopts the principle that an integrated neighborhood is a bad risk, is a financial risk, that an integrated neighborhood is likely to be an unstable neighborhood, unstable socially, but therefore also unstable economically.
When the white residents of 8 Mile Road in Detroit were told they were too close to a black neighborhood to qualify for a positive FHA rating, they built this 6-foot wall between themselves and their black neighbors. Once the wall went up, mortgages on the white properties were approved. Between 1934 and 1962, the federal government underwrote $120 billion in new housing. Less than 2% went to non-whites.
I can understand an individual, depending on his environment or his family or whatever, being racist, but for your country to sanction it give him tools to do that, there's something deadly wrong there.
I think we had the golden chance after World War II, and we flubbed it, because here we had a GI Bill that was that was available to everybody, but in a way they didn't make it available to everybody, and that was a golden opportunity in this country, and we missed it. We really missed it.
You can always tell, can't you? A town with good real estate people is a more substantial community because more people own their own homes. That's right.
And now it's sort of hard to believe that the federal government nationalized and introduced redlining. In a funny way, it wasn't just giving something to whites, it was constructing whiteness. Whiteness meant, as in the past, white has meant being a citizen and being a Christian. It now meant living in the suburbs.
Only 50 years before, European ethnics were believed to be distinct races. Now, in these new segregated neighborhoods, they blended together as white Americans.
We did have different religious groups. We were mixed up there, but we were an all-white community, and I think it's an unrealistic world. I think there's something sterile about everyone being on the same economic level and everyone being the same color.
It certainly doesn't promote a feeling of a wider world, wider, not whiter, to live in a place where there are only people that look like you.
Cartoonist Bill Griffith remembers moving from Brooklyn to Levittown as a kid.
It's an untenable artificial world. You're creating a weird utopia in a way. A utopia of middle-class white people who were trying to deny that they were living in a multi-racial world. And how long can you keep that up? And you can't keep that up forever. Whether there were going to be black people in Levittown was just, it would be almost the equivalent of saying, are there going to be Martians in Levittown?
Basically, the idea of whiteness is who's included, who's part of the family, and it has material consequences. Blacks weren't completely left out of the housing market. The housing market that they were exposed to was largely public housing. And public housing, first of all, was built almost exclusively, with a few exceptions, in the central city. And after World War II, we started building larger and larger public housing projects, which are called vertical ghettos. All of a sudden, you're concentrating large numbers of poor people of color in one place.
Another federal program, urban renewal, was supposed to make cities more livable. 90% of all housing destroyed by urban renewal was not replaced. 2/3 of those displaced were black or Latino.
Fair housing for all human beings who live in this country is now a part of the American way of life.
In 1968, President Johnson signed the Fair Housing Act. For the first time, racial language was removed from federal housing policy. Non-white families began moving into traditionally white communities in numbers.
We lived in an apartment, a two-family house in Queens, and when we came here, it was the first time we had bought a house, and I was looking for everything in the storybooks.
The Frisbees moved from Queens to suburban Roosevelt, only a few miles from Levittown. Like the Frisbees, many non-white families would discover the economic value of race in the real estate market. They watched as their homes and neighborhoods in suburbia declined precisely because they had moved into them.
When I moved into a neighborhood, I thought it would stay intact the way it was. On the street that I moved on when I moved there, it was predominantly white. Within 2 years, it was predominantly black.
It was called blockbusting. Real estate agents preyed on the racial fears of white homeowners to get them to sell their homes quickly for less than market value. The homes were resold to non-whites at inflated prices.
Well, they would say, you know, we're having black people move in. Now, I will give you cash if you want to sell me your house. Do you want to stay with black people next door to you? And that's the way it went on. And as Bunny said, a lot of the people just said, yes, I'll take the money and run. And that's the start of the white people leaving.
As more black and Latino families moved to Roosevelt, real estate became more and more depressed, just as the FHA had predicted. But why?
I have an idea my house is probably worth around 120 in this town. But what it would be worth in Wantor or Garden City or some other place, probably around 200,000 or better. Now you're talking about 80,000. You said to me one time about why do people dislike the blacks? Well, money-wise, there's a reason. Not that you dislike the blacks so much, but you dislike what happens when a community turns from white to black.
It wasn't African Americans moving in that caused housing values to go down in Roosevelt and other neighborhoods. It was whites leaving.
When a neighborhood, a previously white neighborhood, starts to integrate, even if individual whites don't have personal or psychological animosity or racial hatred, they still have an economic incentive to leave because they recognize that others might make the same calculation and leave first. So you get a vicious circle where whites calculate that other whites are going to sell when a neighborhood integrates, therefore they want to sell first to avoid losses, and they actually make it happen. They make white flight happen.
And if you think about African Americans, if African Americans are 20% of that market, it means that 80% of the people are not looking in those places for homes. So the prices of those homes declines or stays stable. And banks contribute to this by continually making loans in regions that are on the rise, white communities, and making it difficult to get loans in black communities.
So there's a difference. There's a lack of symmetry that's important to keep in mind. So it's not the same when whites are all by themselves. Because when they're all by themselves, they're taking all the resources with them. They're taking all the amenities with them. But when blacks are by themselves, they can't get loans. They don't have a decent tax base. There are no jobs. And then that becomes associated with black space.
In the end, what happened to Roosevelt happens in many neighborhoods when white families and businesses flee. The tax base eroded. Schools and services declined. The town was seen by county officials as a legitimate dumping ground for welfare families.
At one point, we had explicit laws that says whites are on top and blacks are on the bottom. Today we have many of the same practices without the explicit language. And those practices are largely inscribed in geography. And so geography does the work of Jim Crow laws. So many people are confused as why after 50 years of civil rights are our schools still segregated? Why are our housing markets still segregated? Why are our jobs still segregated? And again, a lot of this is a function of how we've reinscribed the racial geographic space in the United States. That structure is still what we're living with today.
As homes in white communities appreciated in value, the net worth of these white families grew. For most non-white families who stayed in urban neighborhoods, the housing market open to them in the 50s and 60s was largely a rental market. You don't gain equity by paying rent.
Where one's family lives in America is not just a matter of taste and preference. You have the issue of housing and wealth. The majority of Americans hold most of their wealth in the form of home equity. So that's their nest egg. That's how they can finance the education of their offspring. That's how they can sort of save up for retirement. It's their savings bank, right? They're living in their savings bank.
My family, like a lot of families, was in Detroit struggling to buy a house. You had a dual housing market, one white, one black. A housing market with one with a lot of demand, another housing market with very little demand. My father lives in the house that I grew up in. The house today, 5-bedroom house, is worth about $20,000. The same house bought in the suburbs would be worth today about $320,000. So whites moving to the suburb were being subsidized in the accumulation of wealth, while blacks were being divested.
And these were public policy decisions in which, on one hand, people were given access to property, given title, and subsequently wealth, and on another hand, where people were not given access to property, did not generate wealth, and did not generate the kind of opportunity for the next generation.
So if you can get a government loan and with your GI Bill, your newly earned college degree, and buy a house in an all-white area that then appreciates in value, that then you can pass on to your children, then you're passing on wealth that has all been made more available to you as a consequence of racist policies and practices. To the child of that parent, it looks like my father worked hard, bought a house, passed his wealth on to me, made it possible for me to go to school, mortgaged that house so I could have, you know, relatively debt-free college experience and finance my college education. How come your father didn't do that? You know, well, there's some good reasons why maybe your father had a harder time doing it if you're African American or Latino or Native American.
And the thing that's really slick about whiteness, if you will, is that most of the benefits can be obtained without ever doing anything personally. For whites, they're getting the spoils of a racist system, even if they're not personally racist.
To glimpse one of the far-reaching consequences of racial inequality, you need only consider one statistic: comparative net worth or wealth. If you add up everything you own and subtract all your debts, what's left is your net worth.
Today, the average black family has only 1/8 the net worth or assets of the average white family. That difference has seemingly grown since the 1960s, since the civil rights triumphs, and is not explained by other factors like education, earnings rates, savings rates. It is really the legacy of racial inequality from generations past. No other measure captures the legacy, the sort of cumulative disadvantage of race, or cumulative advantage of race for whites than net worth or wealth.
Even with the same income, white families have on average twice the wealth of black families. Much of that difference lies in the value of their homes. But what happens when we compare families along the color line who have similar wealth?
When you make the right comparison, when you compare a black kid from a family with the same income and wealth level as the white kid from the similar economic situation, rates of college graduation are the same. Rates of employment and work hours are the same. Rates of welfare usage are the same. So when we're talking about race in terms of a cultural accounting of these differences or a genetic accounting of these differences, we're really missing the picture because we're making the wrong comparison.
We want to be a colorblind society that values the content of character over the color of skin. The hope of thousands of newcomers who arrive each year is that we already are.
To the flag, the United States of America, and to the republic of which
I don't see color. I see people, the saying goes.
There are people from 100 other nations who look different from you. People whose religion, history, skin color, and reason for being here today may be different from yours.
But in post-civil rights America, is colorblindness the same as equality?
The notion of colorblindness came to us from that famous I Have a Dream speech of Dr. Martin Luther King, where he said that people should be judged by the content of their character and not by the color of the skin. And what has happened in the post-civil rights era is that whites have assumed that we are already there, that we're in a society where color does not matter.
On the one hand, the civil rights era officially ended inequality of opportunity, officially ended de jure legal inequality. At the same time, those civil rights triumphs did nothing to address the underlying economic and social inequalities that had already been in place. It doesn't recognize the fact that the rewards, the house, the Lexus, the big bank account, those are not only the rewards of the pot of gold at the end of the game, they're also the starting position for the next generation.
The wealth gap grows. The advantages of being white accumulate from one generation to the next.
What are the benefits or the advantages to being white in a society that has historically given benefits and advantages to members of the dominant group? And if you are a person who has that privilege, you don't necessarily notice it.
So until we recognize that there's really no way to talk about equality of opportunity without talking about equality of condition, then we're stuck with this paradoxical idea of a colorblind society in a society that's totally unequal by color.
Claiming we don't see race won't end racial inequality. As Supreme Court Justice Harry Blackmun said, to get beyond racism, we must first take account of race. There is no other way.
And just as we're born into this system, we don't ask to be loaded up with stereotypes or omissions or distortions when we come into the world. We don't ask to be in a structure which is unfair, but that's what we have inherited. Whether you identify as a person of color, whether you identify as a white person, it doesn't matter.
I think we have to be uncomfortable with the present racial arrangement. In a sense, I think we have to be willing to be uncomfortable, willing to demand more of ourselves and more of our country, and willing to make the invisible visible.
I think we all have to think about, what can I influence? I don't influence everything, but the things I do influence, I can think about, how am I making this a more equitable environment? I can ask myself, who's included in this picture and who isn't? Who's had opportunities in my environment and who hasn't? What can I do about that?
All right, everybody, we're back. Okay, there you have it. You got the rundown on back in the day and exactly what happened, how this stuff got started. And keep in mind, Dr. Claude Anderson, and they already gave you the definition of what racism is. So you know now that it is a group thing. Okay, it's in the sheriff's department. It's in the mayor's office. It's in the governor's office. It's in the fire department. It's in the medical profession. It's on Capitol Hill. It's in Congress. It's in the Senate. It's in your local grocery store. It's in the Dollar General. It's in your church. It's everywhere as a group thing. But now, we're going to take it to a whole new level now, because what they have done now is they have opened up the borders, and the current presidential administration have allowed people from all over the world to just come in here. And guess what? They all got information about you and me and how we've been subjugated and treated all these years, so they adopt the same philosophy. Now you got people who come from abject poverty in other parts of the world to get up in here, legally or illegally. I'm better than you because you are the Negro, or the African American, or the black guy, or the colored guy that they told us about. And you see that all over the United States. Keep in mind now, we're still talking about the definition of what racism is. It is a group thing. And what is happening is, see, they got a lot of us still believing that we came from somewhere else to this land. Okay, that's a lie. We'll do a DNA thing on you, and we can determine where your ancestry came from. And we discovered that you came from we traced you all the way back to sub-Saharan Africa. But not one single time has anybody said, well, we did a DNA on you, and we found out that you were absolutely indigenous to this land. Can't do that, because once they start doing that, that's when the shooting and killing gonna start, because it goes against the grain of the original lie. See, once you tell a lie, you got to continue to do maintenance on that lie to keep that lie propped up. We didn't all come from someplace else. In fact, the so-called, because they done took your coat off your back in the wintertime and gave it to somebody else and told them people, you are the original natives of this land, totally overlooking the fact that they know that they are not absolutely indigenous to this land. But we don't want to talk about what's indigenous and what's not indigenous. We have the Native Americans. Notice that word Americans attached to the word Native. And then we have the Negro. And then we immediately goes into slavery. And but don't worry, you ain't got to worry about it because we just on part 1. We're coming back with part 2. Okay? All right. Now, let's go back and deal with some more law because I get excited about this stuff right here that we're dealing with because it's so obvious for me to see. And it's the most, sometimes I be in total amazed wonderment because it rocks me beyond the bounds of human sanity. How you could invest this kind of money in the lives of human beings just to prop up a lie. It is the most damnable heresy in recorded history that I ever seen in my life. Okay, but let's go back to these contracts for a minute. The affidavit of your name. The all-cap franchise is a trust. It stays here, the undersigned, true name, which you're supposed to put there. Hereafter, affiant does hereby certify and declare that affiant is competent to testify and state the matter set forth herein and is willing to testify with first-hand knowledge all contents herein are true, correct, and complete. In accordance with affiant's first-hand personal knowledge, affiant is of sound mind and over the age of 21. Affiant reserves all rights. Affiant knowingly and willingly affirms. Number 1, affiant is the person making this affidavit. All right, let's stop right there. Our affidavit is different from a letter. If you call me, I tell you the difference. I ain't gonna waste no time all down, and I do that every day. Original lender, which is your name, and all caps. Hereafter, lenders engaged in the business of taking deposits, making loans, of finding sole, legal, and absolute owner, making or issue of the estate. Now, keep in mind, I told you now, your all caps name is a trust. And any assets of property regarding the estate, affiant has never assigned, transferred, nominated, or any of affiant's right, title, or interest in any others. Affiant has no knowledge of, nor has lender ever revealed or disclosed to affiant any trust relationship or creation of any trust or any others regarding alleged account or the mortgage deed or trust. Affiant never intended to agree or consent to any trust relationship or creation of trust between lender and affiant. Okay, now remember earlier I told you about contracts. The United States does not interfere with your right to make contracts. Now, this document that I have in my possession, I did not create it. However, it doesn't have anything to do with who created it or who else created it. It don't have nothing to do with it. Is it correct? Is it true? Can you use it? That's what's important. Very, very, very important. But let's continue on because I only have so much time to deal with what we're dealing with here this evening. And we're going to get down into what is a psychopath. And, wow, I know y'all already know all of that kind of stuff. But we got to deal with it tonight. That's what's on the books and stuff. But what I'm going to do is take a little quick break. And I'll give you a break, and we're going to listen to a little music. We come back, do a little commercial, then we go back on down and this thing. Y'all hold on a minute. right, we're back. Now, let's finish up with this before we get down into all this other stuff that's going on. Let's deal with numbers in our people. Now, everything on the planet is assigned to mathematical equations. You have to understand that. See, we got a whole lot of stuff going on in our head. What is his name? What's that guy name? He did a magnificent job, and I know he's been in the ancient records. When I heard him, I think his name was Howard. Yeah, Terrence Howard. He said there are no straight lines in nature. Okay, you're right. But what we do down here on the planet is, we first of all, we have allowed somebody else to come upon our land and maneuver into positions through murder and violence, subjugation and racism and all this stuff, and try to educate us, even though they came from abject poverty, human degradation, and pure backward stupidity. That's the only way I can categorize it, looking at what I seen from the Moors in Spain compared to what was going on in Europe during the same time, what was happening in Egypt compared to different places around the world, in China and all these different places. It is amazing to me because, okay, let's go back to this point. There are no straight lines in nature. There's no straight lines in the universe, okay? When you see a tornado coming, the tornado is in a circular motion. When you see a hurricane coming, it's in a circular motion. Okay, and this list can go on and on and on. But we build structure because the people, so-called experts, say, well, we'll build a square structure, and you got 4 corners at 90-degree angles. 4 times 9 is what? That's 36, ain't it? 6 plus 3 is 9. Okay. Then we got all this disaster happen because of all of these straight lines. Now, over here where I live, going toward my mother's house, there's the church. And this is the only round church that I've ever seen. And that church sits there, and no matter what kind of storms come, they go around that church. Because that church is created in the same circle of motion that the storms go. Now, the powers that be, they have figured this out now, and now they are creating communities with round structures. After all of these years, the science has been right there in your face. I'm not going to go down in all of that. But what I am going to do is go up here and deal with my girl again, because we got to bring this stuff back to the point, because I'm still not through with you clearly understanding the psychology of law and power and racism. I still haven't gotten all, I still don't feel comfortable at this point with you clearly understanding that. So I'm bring my girl in and she's going to say a little bit. Okay? Hold on.
for many of us who are in the oppressed class or whatever. I don't even use those kind of words to describe people because I just feel like, you know, at some point we have to get to a point of truth and reckoning about who we are and make our way regardless, right? But for you, this exploration was about what? What conclusion did you want people to come to after reading your works?
Well, in other words, it's absolutely critical that black people understand the dominant power dynamic on the planet that impacts their lives 24/7 times 365 times the length of time they've been on the planet. So this is the dominant, for example, the very fact that we are talking, this is October the 13th, 2014, the fact that we're talking about racism, the fact that we're talking about something that I wrote about racism speaks to the dominance of racism, and there's no way of escaping it. For example, all of the issues that are in Ferguson are related to racism, white supremacy, black males being killed by white males with guns.
Your chapter 15, the symbolism, logic, and meaning of justifiable homicide in the 1980s. This book, by the way, was written in the 1980s. So what you're saying to me is even more poignant. As I was rereading this chapter 15 last night, I'm like, wait a minute, this is still going on, you know. And you break down how this system of justifiable homicide, as it relates to police officers and black males in particular in the society, came about. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because Ferguson today, they had a march yesterday, actually this weekend, and I'm going to talk about that later on in the show. But yeah, that's a hotbed right now. That topic is, you know, and everyone thinks it's new, but it's not.
See, it's not new. It's not new at all. In other words, aspects, the dynamic of racism, white supremacy has been black people's experience for the last 500 years. And black people have operated in a system of praying and hoping that tomorrow it will be gone. Or if certain legislation is passed, it'll be gone. Just like our ancestors who were enslaved. They thought, well, if they take off the chains, our problems will be solved. But the chains were replaced with laws, and the laws were changed, and black people thought, well, everything is fine, we got a black president, everything is fine, and now we find ourselves in really one of the most desperate situations, local, national, global, because we have right now thousands of black people being impacted by Ebola on the continent of Africa. Those people in the west coast of Africa, those are our ancestors.
So what can we do? Because
Well, do you see, Neely Fuller, who is the person that helped me understand racism, white supremacy as a system, he says this: if you do not understand white supremacy, racism, what it is and how it works, everything else that you understand will only confuse you. Do you see? In other words, it's no different than saying, if you're on a football field and you don't understand what the game of football is about, then you're completely confused. You'll be twirling around in a circle, not knowing what to do with your behavior.
So what should we do? Because at the end of the day...
Well, do you see, I've just stated.
Knowledge is power.
People have to understand exactly and specifically what racism, white supremacy is. And I say it's a power system dynamic structured and maintained by persons who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thought, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people activity, economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and preventing white genetic annihilation on planet Earth.
Okay, and once we understand that, okay, all right.
It's planet upon which the vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white by white-skinned people, and all of them are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to genetic recessive white-skinned people. Do you see? So just understanding, in other words, I don't talk about white people hating black people or people of color. No, people who classify themselves as white on planet Earth are embarked on a system of behavior that permits them to not be genetically annihilated.
Which is the first law of man, right? Survival, right? Everybody wants to survive, right?
But it's like, as long as you don't understand specifically what people are doing, you're confused.
I got you. So once we understand that this is what we're in, what do we do with this to prevent the next Michael Brown or the next Trayvon Martin or the next Eric Garner? What?
See, in other words, once you understand what fire is, you don't go around asking people, if fire breaks out in your home, what do I do? Because you understand fire. You don't stand in your house looking at a fire and telling yourself it's a bunch of a rose bush growing in the corner. If it's fire because you understand fire in depth, then you know what to do. Fire is one of the first things that parents have to help children understand. So once your brain understands something, this is why black people go around asking each other, hey, what's happening? What's happening? What's happening? Hey, what's happening? Because we don't know what's going on. We have been deceived when somebody tells you you're in a system of democracy and everybody is equal and everybody has equal opportunity. But that's not true. We're in a system of racism, white supremacy. And what makes black people have high blood pressure, stroke, kidney disease, diabetes, dying prematurely, obesity, all of these are illnesses specifically related to the hammering of 24/7 stress. Racism, white supremacy is 24/7 stress on black people. There's a black man just in my office talking about the employment stress as people try to prevent a highly educated, well-trained black male from advancing in a job situation. Look at what is happening to President Obama.
So when you see patients in your psychiatry practice in D.C., which is where you have your office, right? And people come in, how do you treat them? I mean, do you prescribe something? Like, what are some of the ways that folks can deal with the everyday stresses that they're dealing with?
No, you ask a person who comes into a psychiatrist's office, you know, like, what is their chief complaint, or how is it that I may help you? What is the problem? So people come to the doctor with a problem. My answer is not, let me get out my prescription pad. My response is, let me listen to you. Let me hear the history of your complaint. And with a black person, it's always some aspect of racism, because racism is the highest form of terrorism and violence on the planet.
Do you have white patients?
I've had white patients. I have a few white patients at this point.
Do you treat them based on your belief system rooted in this white supremacy?
See, in other words, people have to be treated in psychiatry. Everything has to do with reality. and people whether or not they are in touch with reality. And black people are forced into distortions of reality because they're forced into, in a significant degree, to deny racism. In other words, you will get in trouble with people who classify themselves as white if you talk about racism.
Okay, I'm going to do that today. I'm going to do that because you just said
You're
that.
going to do what?
I'm going to talk about it. I'm going to talk
Well,
about
this is very important.
No, I'm going to talk about it.
We got to go back to the first black attorney general appointed under the first black president. In my book, Eric Holder is the hero of the day because he dared to say, are we a nation of cowards?
And he had to leave office under what we know.
Being unable to talk about racism. Do you see? But in other words, he is fundamentally saying, being unable to talk about reality, the country is headed towards disaster.
Okay. And I'm going to put that question out to our listeners because I'm curious, and I'm so grateful for you doing all of the work that you're doing. And folks, if you're in the D.C. area and you need a psychiatrist, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing is the one you should go see. The ISIS Papers is still in circulation. I just ordered another copy. I may give it away at some point on the air as well. The Keys to the Colors. Thank you so much for joining us and dropping that bit of knowledge on us today. Thank you so much, Dr. Welsing.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, everybody, we back. Now, I have to commend the sisters on this. She says she gonna get out there and she gonna try. But this was done back in the day. But I tried it last week in a health food store. And the guy was back there. He was talking about the different calisthenics he do, white guy, and you know, he's looking good and all of that there. And I had another brother that was on the side. He's truck driver, and he's talking about he deliver fuel oil for NASA and all that right there, and all that right there. And I said, well, hey man, you know, I don't do none of that. What y'all doing and stuff like that, you know. But after the brother left, it was me and the owner of the business. We was there, man to man and one-on-one. And then I brought it up. And I said, well, you know, America lied to you. He said, well, you know, America always lied. And then I started talking to him about the original people and the indigenous to the earth and, you know, describing their lives in details and stuff. And you say, well, man, I'll be honest with you, I've heard this before, but my head is spinning, man. Could you, if I give you my phone number, would you call me and tell me? So I come to the conclusion there are a whole lot of people that's been under the illusion. I want to continue to strike while the iron is hot. So we're going in now with the biggie.
We should say theory of color confrontation and racism. You call racism white supremacy. To be sure, a provocative and controversial theory on skin color and oppression. Well, I'm ready. So is this mostly but not exclusively white audience. Let them have it, Doctor. How? Boy, oh boy, you need an escort to get out of your speeches?
No, now, let me just give you a little background. This paper was written approximately in 1969 and presented in 1970. It was written for a group of black psychiatrists who were looking at racism.
Yeah.
It was also written because as a psychiatrist and working in a hospital trying to treat black people and white people, but recognizing that the majority of the problems that black patients had in a psychiatric hospital, when you took a history, you would run smack into racism. So I knew I had to understand racism to help solve the mental health problems of black people. Okay. So out of my brain computer, putting in the question, why? Why do we see this behavior? Why have we seen it for hundreds of years? So I thought about these two things, basically two facts, that even though the white population says that people of color are minorities, that it is the white population that is the minority on the planet.
That's the reality you're saying.
That's the reality.
Yeah.
That in spite of the fact that black people, non-white people have heard over and over again, you're genetically inferior because you are non-white. That in reality, white skin is a genetic recessive status, not as said by Francis Welsing.
What did
you see? Meaning that if
if you and I were to have a baby, the baby would have color, and you make the contribution and I don't.
That white plus colored. Well, wait a minute. It's not Francis Welsing that is concerned about the disappearance of white. Ben Wattenberg just wrote a book, The Birth Dearth. There have been multiple articles in the newspaper talking about the decline of Western populations.
Yeah, here's the Washington Post, just to name one. We are a depopulation bomb, the withering of the Western world. Here, incidentally, this was the percentage of the West's population in 1900, the turn of this century, about 30%. This is where we'll be less than 10% in the year 2075. Here's where we are about today, 15. So we're not having babies.
So whites are not having babies, and there is the concern about white genetic annihilation. In other words, I look at, this is Dr. Martin Luther King's birthday holiday, and people will say, well, here's a man who talked about love. Yeah. Why was he killed? And I say that the deeper logic is, what if all black and white people and non-white people and white people love? What would happen to white people? White would disappear. You see, just mix all of the people on the planet up together.
In other words, if race didn't matter, or if color didn't matter, it follows with the jet plane.
No, I'm not saying if it didn't matter. I'm saying that, indeed, if there was a mingling of all of the people, because
the ability... Okay, fine. Absence of prejudice.
The ability... No, wait, don't confuse what I'm saying. I'm saying that if we mixed all of the people presently on the planet, stirred them up,
the white freckle-faced people would be gone.
Genetic recessive status would disappear. And that if I did a survey and everybody didn't have to, face anybody, if I said how many people who are white want their children to be white, want their grandchildren to be white, want their great-grandchildren to be white, want their great-great-grandchildren to be white. And I've gone all over the country in England and asked this question. Yeah. Everybody wants the children and the generations to remain white. Yeah. If you do, then you have to do something to make sure that that happens. And I say that what the thing is that is done, and particularly in relationship to black non-whites, because we have the greatest genetic potential to cause white genetic annihilation.
Because you're the blackest.
Because we,
the most color.
Right. We have this ability to produce melanin pigment. We have more of it than anybody else. And so the most pressure is on black people. As a matter of fact, the black people learn, all non-white people over the world learn. If you're black, stay back. If you're yellow, you're brown, stick around. If you're yellow, mellow, white, right. I can go to England and the people can just say the same thing. Doesn't matter if you go to the Philippines, because there has been a confrontation of brown with white. Everybody knows the more pigment you have, the more pressure that is on you.
Yeah.
But they didn't understand why. I said the why is for the purpose of white genetic survival.
All right. And you're saying that blacks have no similar hidden, subconscious anxiety about their blackness being undermined by the presence of white?
We don't have that fear. And I think that this is something that is not understood. You see, in other words, if I don't worry about, as a matter of fact, under white supremacy, the non-white people try to get lighter. You see, because the less pigment you have,
co-opting the
less threat you are to white, and so the greater opportunity that you have.
Yeah. The mass inability of whites to live and attend school in the presence of non-whites, manifested by the patterns of black and white housing and education throughout this country, and indeed throughout the world, is seen, according to your thesis, in terms of the color confrontation thesis, as the apparent total psychological discomfort experienced by whites in situations in which they must daily face their color inadequacy when they confront their neighbors of color. You go on.
I predicted. Look, I wrote that in 1970. I said you cannot have integrated housing. You cannot have integrated schools.
You still believe that?
Well, I mean, the evidence. I always look at the evidence. If Mr. Black and Mr. White live next door to each other, they have the same job, the same income, the same car, the same furniture.
Yeah.
They both walk out of the house in the morning. Good morning, Mr. Black. Good morning, Mr. White.
Yeah.
But Mr. White is still looking, but you've got something that I don't have.
You're saying he's saying that
He's
subconsciously.
saying, right.
Now, wait a minute. All right, we'll give you a chance in just a moment.
Wait a minute.
Now, wait a minute.
Let's look at
They're nice people. You're really going to like them, I promise you. You know, once in a while, you know, a couple of them stop before they come up here, and you got to keep an eye on them.
Let's look at this. You know,
go ahead, look at it.
Very fortunately.
Now, let me just understand this. See, the reason they're groaning is, you know, that's an awful bad rap to take. Let me just arrogantly try and reword what I think you're saying. Now, don't get crazy. Let me say.
Please, I'm
Mr. White is looking at Mr. Black, and he's not consciously saying, don't you dare.
Not consciously.
So it is under here.
Not consciously. I mean, we could go on for 3 hours. Not consciously.
All right. All right.
Okay. I am saying that this behavior is at the subconscious level, and there's a lot of evidence. For example, just on Saturday, the New York Times had an article talking about the percentage of people who want a tan. 66%. I have the article if anybody wants to look at it later. 66% of white adults think they look better with a tan. 70% of white adolescents think they look better with a tan. What do white people? Ooh, I look so pale. Now, this is not something that Francis Welsing is putting on people. White females even say their ideal mate is who? Tall, dark, and handsome. Now, Phil,
wait a minute. Just a minute. That whites do indeed desire to have colored skin can be seen by anyone at the very first signs of spring or summer, when they begin to strip off their clothes as many pieces as the law will allow, often permitting their skins to be burned severely in an attempt to add some color to their white, pale, colorless bodies, rendering themselves vulnerable to the dreaded skin cancer in the process. Most cosmetics also are seen as an attempt to add color to their skin. Such coloring makeup is even now being provided for the white male. Well, guess who has you-know-what on at this moment? And if you don't mind my saying so, I do. I put it on myself. I don't go to makeup. I have a shine on my nose I've got to take. But I feel better for a little color. And I've got the whitest skin in the whole neighborhood. I'm telling you. No kidding. I'm not bragging. I'm saying as a matter of fact.
This is not, my discussion is not about making fun of white people. My discussion is trying to explain behavior. People come to psychiatrists
I value your effort here.
Why am I doing this? For example, when I was a very small child, I wanted to understand why black men were lynched. I asked my grandmother and parents, why would this be done? And my grandmother gave a statement. She said something like, well, some people just want to act ugly. But that wasn't sufficient, you know, as a psychiatrist.
May I interrupt for just a moment? Here's the read on that, and I know you want to add to this or make it just a little more complicated. The black male was lynched and often castrated because of the white male fear of the black male's, the myth is the black male's extraordinary sexual capacity. So he was lynched by frightened white males who feared that if he ever got anywhere near the white women, that somehow the white male would be a sex. Now, you want to add to that.
His sexual capacity, what are we talking about? I say that the fear is that the black male can cause white genetic annihilation. And this is why the attack on the genitals, there's no history in the world of any non-white men attacking white men's genitals. But why do white men feel the need to zero in on the black man's genitals and cut them off? You see, and a lot of this is played out in symbolic behavior in this culture. For example, the culture says, keep your eye on the ball.
Yeah.
Now, wait a minute. Look at something that,
I'll get there to just 1 second.
See, look at something that people do not look at. Look at the game of billiards. See, the psychiatrist knows that through games we play out subconscious activity.
Yes, they do.
Okay, now look at this game. Here's a game with colored balls.
Yes.
all over the table.
And guess who gets to shoot the ball?
The white ball knocks all the colored balls under the table.
And often saves the
then
black
the
one.
black ball, right.
Till last.
Till last.
Because there's a specialness about the black. Yeah. Let me, Dr. Welsing, now, you're not surprised at the response of this audience. Just a couple of things here for the sake of our conversation. First of all, we welcome your contribution. That is, for what it's worth, I certainly do. Which does not mean, therefore, that I or this audience necessarily agree with everything you say. But let me tell you what I think is important. I don't think we've asked enough questions about this thing called racism, which has, in my opinion, the capacity to bring us down as a nation, if not, certainly not only here, but in many parts of the world. It is in the American bloodstream, and it's especially manifest here. So good for you trying to figure this out, because no kidding, it's my opinion, not enough smart people are really speaking to this. We run away from this. Another point you make, you think the token black is an effort to assuage this hidden feeling that we have? Is that, how do you explain?
Well, the token black, I mean, you might say that was under pressure, do you see, that you have to, the civil rights movement, you have to include some non-white people. But every effort is made to move around that. Mm-hmm. And I understand, I mean, it's tragic, and it's injustice. Yeah. And I'm not just saying here, I'm saying all over this planet, whether we're talking about South Africa. And see, one important example that people do a lot of surface talking about is the Holocaust. See how quiet it is?
Well,
the Holocaust in Germany was because what? Because the Semites of the Jewish religion were said by the Europeans to be non-white people. The Holocaust didn't just occur.
So you think that there's
Wait a minute. Do you see what I'm saying? If we have denial going on about this, all you have to do is look at what the Nazis are saying today. What the Klan is saying today.
So you're saying anti-Semitism has the same root?
If you read Hitler, if you read all the documentation...
Anti-Semitism has pigmentation as it's under
the... Had to do with the Semites. Look at the part of the world that the Semites come out of. I say that the word Semite comes from the Latin prefix semi, meaning half. It's a word like mulatto. It means a combination of black African women, Greek and Roman soldiers, and you had that mixture. 2,000 years of continuing mixture in Europe made a lighter group of people that were still considered to be non-white.
When you use lighter and you say recessive, and you use the word recessive gene, I think I know what that means.
This is not my language. This is the language of formal genetics.
That's true. But you equate recessive with inferior. Now, just hang on one second.
Go ahead.
I don't claim to be the first one to bring this to your attention, but aren't you dangerously close to Joseph Mengele with all this stuff?
No.
How about Shockley?
No. Wait a minute. No. What I am trying to do is explain some very, very important behavior on the planet that other people have shied away from dealing with.
Yeah.
Do you see? And to say that because you talk about it, it's just like if somebody studied tuberculosis and say, well, are you against the tuberculosis organism? No, you're trying to understand
Well, but you do bring judgments on me. So when you equate recessive with inferior, that's not science. That's
wait a
judgment.
minute. No. I'm not. That's not what I say. I say that the people who are feeling an absence of color, that they look at themselves in that way. And they have a response to therefore say, if I can get in charge of all these non-white people, then I am going to be superior. So nobody is uncomfortable in the white collective with all the white superiority that goes on every day. Look at television. White. Wait a minute.
All right, I got it. Hold on a minute. All right, hang on just 1 second.
Goodness.
Hold 1 second. There are a couple of things which you, listen, there are people out there who say, look at all the progress we're making.
Look at the Urban League report.
I am not one of those people.
Fine.
Nevertheless, there are examples of integrated communities. Truly are.
But see, the answer is not a question of are there a few black people living where white people live. The issue is that if we are going to have peace on the planet, there has to be justice. And white supremacy, where you have the tiniest number of people on the planet holding down the vast majority of people on the planet, happens to be the highest form of injustice.
Yeah.
And so if we are going to have peace, see, I'm not talking about destroy white people, I'm saying, but we do have to eliminate white supremacy. And I say in the back of that paper, the challenge to white behavioral scientists: help people who classify themselves as white become comfortable with their color and comfortable with their minority status, so that they are not feeling negative and then mistreating all of the people that they say are, what, non-white.
Right. Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Yes, I'm here, Phil. Hi. First of all, I'd like to say that I'm white. I can't believe that she's saying that the white people would like to be, I'm assuming she's saying black, not of a darker skin color, but black. I myself am very, very fair-skinned, brunette with green eyes, and I have no desire to be dark.
Why?
Why? I like my color. I was attractive enough that I went to modeling school. I do admit that I do use blush. I do not use blush to, as you say, give myself color. I use it to accent my cheekbones, give myself better appearance.
Do you sunbathe?
No, I don't. And as a matter of fact, I love the beach, and my husband and I, when we've gone to the Bahamas a few times, when we have, I have to wear sunscreen. You know, I don't turn tan. Okay. I get red.
Right.
And I grew up on the beach, and I had a minimal tan. But
you see, but I'm asking.
Well, hang on one second.
I mean, I want to be clear. Is she saying I want to be dark, but I don't want to be black?
Yes.
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 And
so you'd like to be a little darker than you are?
No, I wouldn't say so. I'm very pleased with my color.
Well, then why do you put rouge on?
To accent my cheekbones.
Highlight the cheekbones.
But why do you suntan? Because the American Dermatological Society would prefer...
She does, probably for that reason.
But she goes to the beach.
She does go to the beach.
I go to the beach because I like the water.
I gotta go.
I like the water. I grew up in California.
Let me try one more. Are you there, caller? Go ahead.
Hi. I'm also white, and I'm very comfortable with being white. I think that she's crazy to think that white people want to be black. You know, we might want to have a little color, but I wouldn't want the features of a black person. And as far as...
So what?
She does not want the features of a black person. Do you see, this is...
Hold on a minute.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, in other words, that's racism, but pigmentation isn't?
Well, no, I'm saying that to say I wouldn't want to be, I mean, I can be happy who I am and not say something is negative about the other person.
Well, look, we've got a break here. Is there a, you know, one of the agonies here is half of this audience does not believe that they're racist.
Oh, wait, well,
I am not more than half.
Let me ask this.
You can't fix it if you don't know you have it.
But wait a minute, I want to ask.
How do you explain what's going on here in this country?
I want to say then, who is? That's like going to Germany. I went to Germany in 1957. And I wanted to live with German people and ask them, did they understand what they were doing?
Yeah.
You know, taking their neighbors away and burning them up. Did they understand what was happening? Yeah. Everybody that I talked to knew what was going on. They did nothing. But if you go and say, well, now, who believed what Hitler was saying? Nobody. Everybody says no. You see, every single person says, no,
so
I didn't have anything to do with it.
The people who are saying they're not racist, you're accusing them of not doing it.
No, I'm not accusing. What I would do is, if you have to take a break, is give my definition. You see, give my definition of what I say that racism is.
A functional definition of racism, white supremacy, which you identify with white supremacy, is therefore, for all practical purpose, as follows. The behavioral syndrome of individual and collective color inferiority and numerical inadequacy, which includes patterns of thought, speech, and action as seen in members of the white organization or race. And we'll be back in just a moment. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I think people are racism. Okay, there is a lot of people who do have that in them, but I think the majority of the people like people as they are. And if you're educated...
You mean you like your kind, you mean?
No, all kinds of people. It doesn't have to be your kind, because
So
I can look at a person...
any of it? This thing we call?
No, because I live in Colonia, and we have a whole development of black people, okay? And, well, wait, no, I went to school with them, okay? And I learned to deal with them. I think that if you learn to...
Them.
Well, we mixed as a group. In other words, we weren't different. We weren't treated different. We weren't treated different, so we were all one kind of person.
Hold your thought. You hang on a minute. Go on. What's the matter? What?
This study that was done in 69 and 70, I'd like to know what you've done lately to erase and eradicate racism and to improve
How do you
situations.
feel about what she's saying?
I don't care for it at all.
I want to just say that I feel I am a racist, but every black that calls Whitey a Whitey is also a racist. And I...
Wait a minute. Let me answer that. You see, within a family, people might call each other names. But when we come to the white people on the planet, the majority having organized themselves for white genetic survival, then when a white person can determine what is going to happen to a person of color, that is a difference, because then we're talking about a system of power that can say you can or you can't, or if I want to go back to Germany, because people do a lot of talking about the Holocaust. When the Semites were told, put on this yellow star because you're not white, and you can't go to the university, and you have to live in the ghetto, and you are going to be removed from your homes, that is power. It's not just a question of somebody saying, I don't like John, I don't like Betty. When you have the power to make it impossible for people to live a constructive existence, then that's a difference.
But what we're trying to figure out is why we want that power to do that to another person in the first place. And you're saying white people do it to people of color because they feel,
I think it's a matter of economics more than anything else.
Well,
and if you're a fair person, you're a fair person. And if this, I don't care who is my neighbor, if they can afford to be my neighbor, if they are the same economic ability that our family have, then they're fine. They're welcome to be my neighbor.
Well, wait a minute, we'll be back. I'll give you a chance in just a moment. You know, we do study everything to death. Everything's studied. I mean, figure it out, we study it. Except racism, either whatever scholarship there may be about it, we seem to be running away from, or we're not attracting, our guest accepted, some of the big academics to this issue. You wanted to say.
I'd like to know why Jimmy the Greek had to be fired from CBS for his opinions about blacks, and she can come on national TV and give her opinions about white, and she's not going to get fired from her job. White people can't talk anymore. He got it, and then everybody's trying to get fired. It's ridiculous. And now we have to go write apologies to all black.
Well, I was just going to, I don't think that you can equate what I'm saying to what he said. I mean, you might, and
blacks are moving away from their own.
See, I'm not, let me say this, that I'm not surprised that, you know, what I'm saying might upset people. Now, if you just look, all of the studies that people who say they're white do on black people, the black system, studying the black status, studying this, saying this about blacks, and saying, I mean, the literature is just packed.
But from a behavioral standpoint, I do not think
we have to have an explanation. See, that the Crest theory, that's one person's idea. I challenge everybody in the audience to write about white supremacy behavior. What is your idea about it? Put your idea out there so that you can explain this very considerable behavior on the planet.
I'm not sure you're going to get the majority of the white community to agree that the majority of the white community is engaging in it.
But wait a minute, let me say this. See, I'm not here complaining about what people who classify themselves as white. I made an analysis. I said that basically I see that people who classify themselves are trying to survive genetically. And I am not saying you cannot do that. But I am going to say what it is, and I really advocate that non-white people on the planet stop expecting for white people to commit genetic suicide.
We are almost out.
Doctor, are you aware that within your own culture you also have racism? In other words, my neighbors moved away from the blacks who were moving in next door to us, and so they wanted to move away in order to give their children a better education. I'm talking about Jersey City, where I am coming
and what's
from.
Your point?
And my point is that you also have racism within your own culture.
What are you saying is the racism?
In other words, blacks do not want to live among blacks. They have their own social order. In other words, if my doctor next door to me is black and he prefers not to live among the culture that's moving in to my neighborhood, this happened. I'm evidence of it. It happened many years ago.
Well, are you saying that let's say if you address people of Irish descent, if they move because they have a higher income, are you saying they're conducting racism against their own people?
Say that about a white?
I think that you're clouding the issue. I think that you're clouding the issue about black and white.
Over here, please. I want to give you more time, and someday I'll be a czar, and I'll have all the time I want.
Yes, I do believe that there is a such thing as racism among black people, but I believe it's in response to white racism, as opposed to, black people just want to go out and get white folks.
If you jump on my bones enough, I'm sooner or later going to call you names, or my kids are going to call you.
It's self-preservation.
Yes.
I believe there's racism everywhere, but I think it's more like you're not used to people, you hang out with your own group, and...
That's true, but why is that? Dr. Welsing is offering here a kind of anthropological theory of racism, which has to do with our fear of, that is to say, white people's fear of their diminishing numbers. We're afraid we'll become extinct. She goes one step further to say that intermarriage scares us because it takes our whiteness away. And if everybody were free without all these terrible prejudices and fears, then it certainly, common sense would allow us to conclude that at some point down the line, no whiteness, that is to say, as we think about it in the West, would be left. And she is saying that deep down in here, unconsciously, we're scared to death of that. And that's why we've got black neighborhoods and white neighborhoods.
I disagree. I think you're scared just because people are different, and if you got to know them, you wouldn't be so scared. I don't think it's because we're afraid of being white.
Just for the moment, putting aside theories, and the good doctor is only a theory, I don't accept it as fact, and generalities, and putting this thing on a one-to-one basis, I turned during the, stop, I turned to this lady of color sitting next to me, and I said to her, I don't know about you, but I have never wanted to be black. I'm perfectly comfortable. I've had this white skin for 70 years, and I'm perfectly comfortable.
She agreed. She agreed. That's not a journey.
I wouldn't know how to do it differently. And this lady said she felt the same way about the color of her skin. So
I've never wanted to be white because I've always been happy with my color.
But you haven't denied her thesis. She is saying that you don't want to be black. She knows that. And she's saying something else. She's saying that your interest in not being black is resting somewhere way down in your soul, and it's causing some of us to be scared to death that we might be.
You want to know something, Phil? I never even thought about what this lady brought out today, and having heard
That's
it...
what you call subconscious thinking.
And having heard it, to the little bit that I've thought about it, I must say that I totally disagree with her, although she has a background, and I don't.
Okay. All right. Yes. If you're a man, you get to talk.
With all this talk, with all this thing going on, and everything that's been said, I haven't heard one person make mention, especially you, Doctor, about the transition that's been taking place over the past 25 years. Of 20 years ago, who ever heard of a black mayor in the city of Montgomery, Alabama? I have a business in Patterson, New Jersey. Joe Clark, the principal. Well, Joe Clark, he's doing a fantastic job. He's black. What about all these other things that are happening? Everything that's going on in television today. When did you see a Bill Cosby show become such a big thing on television? He's black.
Yes, ma'am.
First of all, I'd like to commend you on your work. I think it's incredible. And also, I'd like to know how you feel about the recent Newsweek article that came out last week.
We're all women. Women...
Wait, no, just hold on. that addresses the basic assumption that we all are from a common ancestor, meaning we all as humans. And Newsweek revealed that this common ancestor was, in fact, a black woman from sub-Saharan Africa. I'd like to know your comment on that, as well as, do you think that this kind of research, which has clearly been substantiated, really will reach a plateau of exposure? Because I don't think white America is ready to accept the fact that they are indeed genetically descended from a black woman.
Well, I have said that for a long time, that the simplest explanation about the arrival of the different colors on the planet is that you start with black. And from black, if black produces a condition of albinism, then you have white. And then if you mix the two, you get all the colors in the middle. Now, white cannot produce black, but black can produce all of the colors on the planet. So I say, since the paleontologists and anthropologists are saying human life began in Africa and the first ancestors for everybody were black. Now, the very fact that people have trouble with that, you see, says something about the psyche, about what people, after white supremacy has been established, what people end up feeling about color.
I think it's very unusual that a psychiatrist would give a biological reason for racism, because I really feel like racism comes from psychology. And if we took, as you said, all of the genetic pool and mixed it together and did come out with a one world color, I still think people would be racist. They'd find something else to come up with to make people superior to other people.
I am a medical doctor, and a medical doctor has to include the whole body as well as the functioning of the brain that produces the end product of behavior. Now, people, indeed, and I have said, people could have, one of the things that led me to this paper, I said, now, people could have done foot size. You know, I wear 10B, so everybody who has 10B, but people didn't focus on foot size. If they did focus on foot size, some psychiatrists or behavioral scientists would have to come along and raise the critical question, why? But people settled on color. And so as a behavioral scientist, I just put the question in my brain computer and said, why? Why did they settle on color, and what is the significance of color? And let me just throw this out. A few weeks from now is going to be Valentine's Day. And what are the ladies going to want? Chocolate candy.
That's beginning to sound a little paranoid to me, you know.
Well, yeah. Why? Let me answer this. I'll tell you, you know who asked this question on my show?
Why do white people say chocolate is erotic?
Why is chocolate cake devil's food cake and white cake is angel food cake? Muhammad Ali asked that question on this program. And we'll be back in just a moment.
All right, everybody, we're back. Now, that was Dr. Francis Cress Wilson, and that was a classic. And I hope that you got something out of it. And we're not just talking about the laughter, and but what I want you to really think about is the perception of what's going on inside the United States. So what we're going to do now is deal with perception, not so much of what I think about other people, but I am concerned about their perception of me and my people. Perception. And this is all a part of what we're dealing with here this evening when we come to the psychology and stuff, and don't look like, well, yes, I will be able to deal with the numbers and stuff. But right now, we're going to conclude this with the perception. And I'm going to bring in this brother here, and it's only going to be a few minutes, then we'll get on down in here in these numbers and the relationships and stuff like that, which is some things that I personally feel like we got to get right. Okay.
Should we be concerned about how we are perceived in Western media? I guess the Muslim world. I used to be, but now I feel indifferent about what they say about us, be it negative or positive.
I'm more concerned with how we perceive them.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned about that. That's more important than how they can perceive us. Who cares? I honestly don't care how they perceive us. I understand all of the arguments about why we should care, and Rasulullah ﷺ didn't completely dismiss the public image of Muslims and the perception of Muslims, obviously. So I'm not saying be completely dismissive of it. But
don't put them on a pedestal.
It's more important how we perceive them, and that we perceive them accurately. And then it should go further than that, which is they should care how we perceive them. That's what needs to happen. We reverse it. I don't care what you think about me, but you better care about what I think about you.
Yeah, we're not talking about people with a track record of civilization.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. We have to, because, they're lying about us, yes. They lie about us all the time. But they don't do anything but lie about themselves.
Please,
And it's very dangerous when we believe their lies. The lies that they tell about us is actually just so that they can justify being hateful and violent against us, which is something that they are going to be anyway. They are creating a justification by making up lies about us. They create a justification that enables them to make it look like they're doing something good and right and just by being oppressive and violent towards us. But they're going to be violent and oppressive towards us anyway. They come up with these stories and these slanders against us so that they can make themselves feel better about what they're doing. Because, like I've said before, it's very important to them to look good without actually needing to be good. But the problem when we believe their lies about them, this is devastating for us. That's a catastrophe if we believe their lies about themselves. Don't tell yourself that the way they perceive us is why they do what they do to us. That's not why. That's not why at all. They're going to do it anyway. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala already told you. Allah didn't say that they are enemies to you because they don't understand you. They didn't say that that's why. They hate you. They hate the truth. They want to extinguish the light of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with their mouths.
It's very rational.
That's the meaning of that ayah explains to you all of the slanders and the lies that they tell about us. They're trying to extinguish the light of Allah with their mouths. So that's we don't have to be concerned about trying to correct that because it's lies, and they know that it's lies, and that's not why they do what they do.
Because
they say that because that's what they're going to do anyway. And so we need to make sure that our perception of them is based upon our own standpoint and our own understanding and our own belief and upon our deen and upon our actual historical experience with them and objective reality. That's how we have to make our judgment about them. So we have to make sure that our perception of them is accurate and not worry so much about their perception of us. Rather, they should be worried about what our perception is of them, because that needs to also come with consequences. In other words, we're not necessarily going to have anything to do with you.
Once you see the West for what it is, you can never unsee it.
That's right. That's right. And they need to see it. This is what you owe them. This is what you owe them. You need to show them who they are, because this is the only thing that can maybe help them. And that's really to me, that's the best form of da'wah. That's the big obstacle to them coming to Islam, because they think that they're just so great already, and they're so lied to about themselves. They're so delusional about themselves. And the worst approach to da'wah that I've ever seen in my life is the one that has been advocated for the longest time. And when I was young, I don't know how it's still there. Is this idea of we need to de-emphasize the differences between us.
Oh wow.
Why would they come to Islam then if it's the same as what they've got?
Well,
you don't, because the people who come up with that, they are not people who were saved from kufr and came to Islam. So you don't know how miserable it actually is to be a kafir. It's actually a miserable state of affairs. You're in a miserable, it's a miserable way of life to be a kafir. So if a Muslim comes to you and says, what I'm offering you is the same as what you've already got, well, thank you, but no thank you.
Okay, we're back. Now, I think that's in a nutshell, and that is exactly what Dr. Francis Cress well suggests portrayed. And I read an article one time. They had this thing going with the Garden of Eden, and of course, you know, for years and years and years, we always seen this Adam and Eve looking a certain way. But one day, they portrayed this brother with a fro and a sister with a fro, and Adam and Eve, and everybody was all up in arms about it. And but the people that put it out, they said, well, we don't understand what the big deal is about. It really doesn't make any difference. But the people who was up in arms about it, they said, well, if it didn't make any difference, why did you change it? That was phenomenal to me. That was amazing. And you could hear the earth shaking from one end of the earth. It was like an earthquake that shattered the entire planet, as well as I'm concerned, when I see it. But let's get down to our personal nuts and bolts and wiggle pins of what we're dealing with. We're in relationships, and we want to get on one accord. We got numbers, because numbers don't lie. We got 157-248, and we got 369. We got the zodiac, and keep in mind astronomy and astrology and all the stuff that what we previously used to rule the entire world. And before I get down to that, let me say one more thing, because I really want you to think about what I'm talking to you about. The Moors ruled Spain for 980 years. They outlawed bathing in Spain, built over 200 public baths so any man or woman could go behind the wall and take a bath and be cleansed, and built libraries, edifices, buildings. And, I mean, knowledge was universal in there. But the people in there that was not accustomed to that fought until they drove the Moors out of Spain. And the king and queen of Spain passed a law saying it is now against the law for you to take a bath. Now keep in mind, over here in the United States, things are a little bit different. But we got the same type of thinking inside the United States today. A lot of us are unable to recognize what we are witnessing. But nevertheless, let's get on down into this stuff here. You got the zodiac. We might have, let's say, let's see. We got Cancer and Pisces, two water signs. Okay, that's good. Let's say Cancer is 369, but the Pisces is 248. Okay, we got part of it right, but the other part ain't right. Numbers, math ain't right. If we had a Cancer in 369, then the Pisces got to be in 369 too. But however, that's still not enough, because you can have a man in a room and you have three different women in there. And say he's a Cancer, and the three different women, all three of the Pisces. One is a 157, one is a 248, and the other is a 369. But does that mean that he got it right? Not necessarily, because we need to know which 369 is going to be right. for him. So you have to critique it, but what we want to do is we want to get the foundation together, and we're going to have to search and go through a few things until you get it right in order for you to go the distance. The worst thing that you can do, what a lot of us have been doing for years and years and years, ignoring our sciences, ignoring the numbers, and we in hospital, we in jail, and we in the cemetery. We're totally ignoring these things. But nevertheless, I wanted to run across that because it's very, very important for us to understand, to just stop with the business of, oh man, she look good, I got to get with that. And by some hook or crook or by some kind of belief, we got the right individual. No. You got to stop with outside of yourself. Start thinking. Start doing the research. Do the investigation. And then make a decision. And I think that we should do an assessment of our life in any given year. If you've been dealing with an individual for an entire year, then stop at the end of that year, look around in your personal environment and say, well, look, let me see, since I've been associated with this individual, has my life improved? What is it that I can look around here and see that I've benefited? What did I gain as a result of being involved with this individual for this length of time? Now, I know, and I'm not just talking about dealing with personal items, but if you are involved with an individual in a relationship over a period of time, I think that everybody should be able to do an assessment of the relationship. And if you put all of the information into the equation, you'll discover facts are facts. Facts are just gonna be facts. You got a man you've been dealing with for a whole year, and you love him, and so you think, and you think he loves you and all that, but you look around, you can't see nothing that you accomplished but a good feeling. It's amazing. So we're going to have to start dealing with actually doing the research and thinking. That's all I'm trying to get you to do, is think about what you're dealing with. Okay, now let's go. We can get about a few more minutes in there dealing with the okay, let's well, I think hold on, I'm scared to deal with that. And certainly I'm not going to deal with that. Not right now. We'll come back with part 2, like that business right there. But anyway, I'm going to go to a commercial break, and then I'll be right back. Y'all hold on a minute.
Hi, I'm Tarhaka. You know, there's a difference between what you believe and what you know for a fact and can prove. I live in the private and can prove it. I've exercised my freedom of right to travel and can prove it. I don't have a mortgage and can prove it. And much, much more. And so does many other people across this country and abroad who are secured party and creditors living in the private. Debt is a burden. It causes people a hard time in life. They can't live live in peace fast enough. Contact me at tarhakadebtelimination.org. You can call me and I'll answer the phone. Leave your email information on my website and get my free report. That's tarhakadebtelimination.org. Get out of debt. It's nothing but a burden. You can't move forward with that. That's a bunch of junk.
All right, we're back. Now, we're going to deal with the psychology of evil. Because we got them kind of people out there too. We're going to deal with that. But I'm not finished with relationships. And I don't want y'all to think that I'm trying to get you to just look at the physical aspects of what you got when you're dealing with an individual, because you have to do an assessment of your own self. You have to do an assessment of you. And you have to come to the conclusion, what are you going to do about you? You know, what do you want? How valuable are you? What is it that you deserve? And where is it that you want to go, and how do you want your life to be? Should be something that should be at the forefront. Now, in my personal opinion, we got a lot of people out there, and I hear women all the time saying, I want a man like this, and a man this, and a man that, and stuff, but a lot of times I be like, do you understand the definition of what a man is? A man takes full responsibility for himself. He concentrates on being prepared himself before he gets involved and takes responsibility for a woman and her children. That's the way I see it. But now in this society here today, now we got what they call it EGBLT. I think it's, well, I ain't going to get all down there correctly. And then we got transgender and all that. And I'm not down in any of that, but I'm just telling you all of these different variations coming about outside of men and women. And we're trying to adapt to what's going on, but we're still faced with the same principle. Methods and techniques change, but principles never change. We have men, women, and children. If that goes away, then what happens? Our civilization collapses. So we want to do an assessment on our own individualism. What am I doing about me? What am I prepared to do about me? What is it that I'm going to do to prepare myself for the future of me? All right? Now, you got that straight. So now, let's do an assessment on the opposite sex and what's going to go on with that. So we start looking at things from that equation, from that position of the equation, then things take on a brand new meaning. And what it does for me, because I do an assessment, and I'm doing an assessment right now. I'm busy, I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm putting this information out because that's what I do. And I'm taking care of myself, and so sooner or later, then I got to start taking inventory and looking around and see what is it that I see that I have benefited as a result of what I've been doing here lately. So let's go on down into the psychology of evil so we can understand that.
If you study the development of the fantasies of very, very dark people, you see that they brood and fantasize in isolation for years. And the fantasies get darker and darker and darker. So they're bitter and resentful to begin with. And then they start fantasizing about, well, what they would want. That can take a sexual end, or it can take a very violent end, or it can take both. And what they're really after is the ultimate in revenge. And on the sexual front, they find a kick in extending the, what would you call it, unacceptability of the fantasy one stage at a time. The famous and extremely attractive sexual serial killer, what was his name? There's a famous photograph of him like this, very attractive man. Do you remember his name?
Ted Bundy.
Anybody? Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy detailed out exactly how his fantasies progressed as he became more and more involved with pornography. And what happens in some sense is that these people who are nursing these terrible fantasies want to stay on the edge of novelty. And so their fantasies get darker and darker and darker as they progress down that road. And so after 1,000 such micro-progressions, they end up in exactly the sort of pit that you're describing. And some of that is pure sexual kick because of the novelty. But it's got this sadistic and perverse, vengeful twist. And you could think about it this way. I think it says in the Gospels that, it would be better that a millstone was hung around your neck and that you were cast into the abyss than to do harm to any of God's children, let's say. And that's actually where the perverse delight comes, because the most egregious possible sin, let's say, is the violent sexual abuse of the most innocent possible person. And the perverse novelty kick is highest at exactly that point. And then that just goes from bad to worse. And there's 1,000 or even 10,000 micro decisions that go along with that. There's also a great book called Ordinary Men. This is well worth reading, although it's a bloody catastrophe to read, I'll tell you. It details out how a group of German policemen who were moved to Poland during World War II were transformed from ordinary ordinary working class men, old enough to not have been raised under the Nazi regime, by the way, and so not propagandized into a kind of mindless obedience, how they went from being perfectly ordinary policemen to the sort of people who could take naked pregnant women out into the middle of the field and shoot them in the back of the head. And it isn't like they had an easy time with that. Some of them reported the same sort of thing that you reported when you first watched that video. What they were being called upon to do stage by stage made them physically ill. And they had a commander who actually had told them that they could leave the service if they didn't want to continue with their duties. But they felt duty-bound not to leave their comrades having to mop up the terrible situation. But it does a lovely job of detailing out how your movement from normality to absolute perversity is a consequence of 10,000 micro violations of your own conscience. Not all of them micro, obviously. So you need to know about the vengefulness. You need to know about the kick of sadism. That's that novelty kick that produces a dopaminergic kick that heightens sexual satisfaction. And so there's an element of sadistic misery that can add novelty to sex. That's particularly attractive to people who are bitter and resentful because they actually can't find any willing sexual partners. And so they're angry at the world and shake their fist at God because of it. And so anyways, that's a bit of the developmental course of such a lovely descent into hell. And the interesting thing about it is that people brood, Like, you don't get to the point where you're watching pornographic videos of children being raped without hundreds or even thousands of hours of increasingly demented voluntary fantasy. And that's that allowing the spirit of sin that would otherwise crouch on your doorstep to enter your house and have its way with you. Right? It's like a collaborative venture with Satan himself. That's the most straightforward way of describing it. And so, that's, I don't know what you have to say about that, but I'll let you have at her.
I'll say this, that everything you're saying absolutely resonates with my anecdotal experiences dealing with these people. I look into their eyes, and what you're describing is what I see, though I've never been able to articulate it like you just have. So I appreciate being armed with an understanding that it will help me evangelize more clearly to others about the dangers of overstimulation and overuse of pornography and shaking hands with the devil. So thank you for that. That was very insightful.
So I spent a bit of time, not a lot, but a bit of time inside a maximum security prison when I was a kid. I worked with a very strange psychologist that was there. And one of the things that really shocked me, and I think this shocked me enough to change my whole life, was I met this one prisoner who was a pretty nondescript looking character. He took me for a walk out in the yard away from a gym full of like weightlifting, axe murderer, monsters, and rapists. And we went for a walk out in the yard, and the psychologist called us back and told me later in the office that this guy, who was about 5'2", pretty non-prepossessing guy, had made two policemen kneel in front of him, beg for their lives in reference to their families, and then shot them both in the back of the head and kicked them aside. And the shocking thing to me was, you kind of think that if you met pure evil, it would have a monstrous form. And, you know, the thing that shocked me about that was the nondescript nature of this guy. You know, his absolutely banal ordinariness, the fact that you could just walk past him on the street and you'd never know. He wasn't some monster, you know, the monstrous character of Satan in your imagination is, you know, a figure that's terrifying to behold instead of someone normal. You know what I mean? Normal in that cringing sense. These people that you've interacted with, like, what's your reaction to them when you talk to them, the pedophiles, when you talk to them and when you arrest them?
My experience is very similar to what you just described. Very nondescript, people of all walks of life. We've arrested and I've interrogated educators, lawyers, law enforcement, clergymen, and sitting across from them, but with no apparent physicality that would tell you who they are. But I will say this: when they start talking and I look into their eyes, that's when I sense something that really scares the hell out of me. And the way they talk about children when they get there, and it's something that they've been able to normalize, and they're speaking to me about children almost like they're talking about, you know, the weather, or, you know, talking about buying and selling children like you talk about buying and selling computer parts or an automobile or something. And that's where I thought, something has taken over you. Something non-human has made you less human. And I've never been able to figure it out, only that it creeps me out. And I usually end up getting them to confess because they have brought themselves to a place where they think they're okay. They think that it's somehow normal. I don't know if that makes sense.
How do they,
Dr. Peterson?
Well, the degree of rationalization that has to, with each step forward in the progress of the fantasy, there has to be a step forward in the self-deception with regards to self-description, right? So imagine that you're attempting to cling to a sense of yourself at least as normal, but even maybe as a moral agent. I mean, the more forthright pedophiles claim that they're only allowing children to express their true sexual desires, and that what they're actually doing is forming the best relationship with the children that they've ever had. Now, of course, there's part of them that knows that that's an absolutely bloody, screaming, hellish lie. But you get to that lie, like I said, with 1,000 micro lies, right? And you're modifying your self-conception along the way. I mean, have you had these people justify themselves to you? And if so, by what means do they attempt to do that?
So one person that comes to mind, absolutely, the answer is yes. And one person that comes to mind is the person depicted in the film Oshensky. This person had written articles, self-published, of course. He had a book that he actually sold on Amazon, and his understanding or his justification was that the puritanical society of this country has crushed the true and beautiful and righteous sexual experience, which the most natural would be between a man and a child, a prepubescent child. A prepubescent child is the most beautiful form of humanity, and why take that away from a child? Children would be well conditioned to confront the challenges of life if only they could experience orgasmic pleasure even in their prepubescence. This is how they talk.
Right. Well, that you saw echoes of that. There was attempts made in the 1970s by French intellectuals, surprise, surprise, to have the age of consent reduced radically. And that was always the rationale. It was an extension of the patriarchal oppression theory in some sense, right? That all sexual expression is essentially pure and good in its most fundamental form. And it's all warped by social pressure. And if we were just allowed to express ourselves in every manner that we saw fit, then everyone would be free and we wouldn't suffer anymore from the constraints of tyrannical society, right? And it's just convenient for the bloody pedophiles that happens to justify them doing whatever the hell they want to children who are obviously too young to consent.
The goal of Academy of Ideas is to empower the individual and promote freedom. Become a supporting member to help us in our mission and access over 75 membership videos with more added each month. Sign up now at academyofideas.com/members. Human predators populate our society. Psychopaths are human predators. They coerce, manipulate, lie, steal, defraud, abuse, and take life without feeling guilt or remorse. A leading expert on psychopathy, Robert Hare, estimates that 1% of people are psychopaths, while the clinical psychologist Martha Stout suggests this figure is closer to 4%. Studies indicate that psychopaths are overrepresented in the corporate executive world and in politics. In this video, we are going to explore the psychology of the psychopath, as this knowledge can help us minimize the damage they inflict on us, those we care about, and humanity at large. Compared with other major clinical disorders, little systemic research has been devoted to psychopathy, even though it is responsible for far more social distress and disruption than all other psychiatric disorders combined, writes Robert Hare. Psychopaths are found in every segment of society, and there is a good chance that you will have a painful or humiliating encounter with one. Your best defense is to understand the nature of these human predators. Individuals such as Ted Bundy, Charles Manson, or Jeffrey Dahmer are who come to mind when most people think of the psychopath, and while such individuals are psychopathic, they represent an extreme of this disorder. Most psychopaths, rather than committing violent crimes, engage in immoral acts that fly under the radar of the criminal justice system. They will abuse family members or neglect their well-being. They will cheat others out of money, pathologically lie, or manipulate others for selfish ends. Many people know nothing about this disorder, writes Martha Stout, or if they do, they think only in terms of people who have conspicuously broken the law many times over and who, if caught, will be imprisoned. Most psychopaths are not incarcerated. They are out here in the world with you and me. The reason most of us refrain from routinely exploiting and harming others is because we possess a conscience. We empathize with the suffering of others, and if we make another suffer, we feel guilt. Psychopaths have no conscience, and they lack the ability to feel empathy and guilt. In fact, a psychopath does not feel love, friendship, or any emotional connection to anyone at all. If psychopaths maintain ties to other people, it is only because they see them as a possession, resource, or tool. This emotionless void, which exists in the heart of the psychopath, makes them capable of repeatedly engaging in acts that harm other people. Even experienced and case-hardened professionals find it unnerving when they see a psychopath's reaction to a gut-wrenching event, or listen to him or her casually describe a brutal offense, as if an apple had been peeled or a fish gutted, writes Robert Hare, or as he continues, the psychopath is a self-centered, callous, and remorseless person, profoundly lacking in empathy and the ability to form warm emotional relationships with others, a person who functions without the restraints of conscience. If you think about it, you will realize that what is missing in this picture are the very qualities that allow human beings to live in social harmony. In place of the emotional connections which create meaning in the lives of normal people, the internal life of the psychopath is driven by the pleasure principle and the need for continual excitement. Many psychopaths are alcoholics, addicted to drugs or sex, and engage in highly risky behaviors. But the most seductive stimulant for a psychopath is power. No matter whether they are a career criminal, an unemployed freeloader, a middle manager, a CEO, a financier, bureaucrat, or politician, the mind of the psychopath is obsessed with controlling other people. Or as Martha Stout explains, the prize to be won can run the gamut from world domination to a free lunch. But it is always the same game, controlling, making others jump, winning. Robert Hare shares a snippet from a psychological report about a psychopath named Earl. The most salient thing about Earl is his obsession with absolute power. He values people only insofar as they bend to his will or can be coerced or manipulated into doing what he wants. He constantly sizes up his prospects for exploiting people and situations. While from our vantage point the psychopath is suffering from a severe mental disorder, psychopaths see nothing wrong with themselves and are sometimes forthright in stating that their condition is a blessing. Their lack of emotional attachments and inability to feel empathy and guilt grant them an unprecedented advantage in what is a dog-eat-dog world, or so they say. Ted Bundy, for example, referred to guilt as an unhealthy social control mechanism that does terrible things to the body. Given that they see their psychopathy as a benefit, it should come as no surprise that attempts to rehabilitate psychopaths fail miserably. In summarizing the literature on the so-called treatments for psychopathy, Robert Hare explains, many writers on the subject have commented that the shortest chapter in any book on psychopathy should be the one on treatment. A one-sentence conclusion such as, no effective treatment has been found, or nothing works, is the common wrap-up to scholarly reviews of the literature. To make matters worse, psychopaths are notoriously difficult to identify. For although inwardly they are as different from us as night and day, outwardly they camouflage their predatory nature with what the 20th century psychiatrist Hervey Cleckley called a mask of sanity. Psychopaths are akin to predatory creatures who mimic the appearance and behavior of their prey. In his article, Snake in the Grass, the psychologist Daniel Jones explains that there are spiders in Australia that smell and behave like ants. Some are so convincing that the ants will allow a spider to live permanently as one of them. This spider will then feast upon its new friends, but it won't eat all the ants, or even a significant number. Instead, it extracts resources slowly, sustainably, and over time. Like the Australian spider, on the social stage, psychopaths often appear normal. In fact, they tend to be more charismatic, charming, and confident than most people. This social allure is partially a function of the fact that psychopaths experience far less stress, fear, and anxiety than the rest of us. But it is also the result of the psychopath's remarkable capacity to lie about their past, their achievements, and their character in a manner which mesmerizes and sometimes psychologically paralyzes their victims. Most of the victims I have known in my work have reported that their initial involvement with a psychopathic person and their continued association, even though she or he caused them pain, was a direct result of how charming she or he could be, explains Martha Stout. Countless times, I have watched people shake their heads and make statements such as, "He was the most charming person I ever met," or, "I felt like I'd known her forever," or, "He had an energy about him that other people just don't have." Luckily, there are cracks in the psychopath's mask of sanity. One of these cracks is a pathologically inflated sense of self-importance, which psychopaths find impossible to hide. Or as Robert Hare explains, psychopaths have a narcissistic and grossly inflated view of their self-worth and importance, a truly astounding egocentricity and sense of entitlement, and see themselves as the center of the universe, as superior beings who are justified in living according to their own rules. The eyes of a psychopath can also reveal their predatory nature, as some victims report that looking into the eyes of a psychopath is akin to looking into the eyes of a reptile. No matter their mood, their eyes are the same: empty, cold, intense, and unsettling. This commonality between the eyes of a psychopath and the eyes of a reptile is one of the sources of the contemporary myth that there exists a race of reptilian humanoids. Some people respond to the emotionless stare of the psychopath with considerable discomfort, almost as if they feel like potential prey in the presence of a predator, writes Martha Stout. Others may be completely overwhelmed and intimidated, perhaps even controlled, with a little insight into what is happening to them. Whatever the psychological meaning of their gaze, it is clear that intense eye contact is an important factor in the ability of some psychopaths to manipulate and dominate others. Another way to see through the psychopath's mask of sanity is to pay attention to their manner of speaking. Psychopaths find it difficult to maintain a coherent narrative. Their statements are often contradictory and littered with inconsistencies. They tend to jump from one unrelated topic to the next, and when asked a question, they are known to respond in a way that is irrelevant to what was asked. Psychopaths are notorious for not answering the question posed to them, or for answering in a way that seems unresponsive to the question, explains Robert Hare. Some psychopaths also accompany their speech with exaggerated hand movements. Researchers believe the hand movements of a psychopath are a function of how their brain processes words, ideas, and emotions, but the hand movements also function as a deceptive strategy. They distract listeners and make it harder to catch on to their inconsistencies and lies. Regarding one psychopath undergoing a psychological assessment, Robert Hare explained, his narrative was accompanied by expansive hand movements and exaggerated facial expressions, a dramatic display that blinded our interviewer to what was happening. The root cause of psychopathy is unknown, but studies indicate that psychopaths are born with a predisposition to psychopathy. They are, in other words, a product of nature, not nurture. There is no convincing body of findings linking the core characteristic of psychopathy, that is, the absence of conscience, with childhood maltreatment, explains Martha Stout. In fact, there is some evidence that psychopaths are influenced less by their early experience than are non-psychopaths. While psychopaths have plagued all societies throughout history, the problem of their existence is amplified by contemporary trends toward political centralization. Governments are reaching their tentacles into ever more areas of life. Global institutions are attempting to place the entire world under the same yoke of tyranny, and developments in technology are creating the potential for a form of totalitarian rule that is far more invasive than anything that has come before. As psychopaths crave power, as they are naturally charismatic, skilled liars, and unconstrained by empathy, fear, anxiety, and guilt, it is reasonable to surmise that some psychopaths gravitate towards, or are actively established in, positions of political power. In his book, Political Ponerology, the Polish psychiatrist Andrzej Łobaczewski proposed the name pathocracy for the type of political system in which psychopaths rule. And unless more people are aware of the threat of this predatory class, this type of rule may become a full-blown reality. I shall accept the denomination of pathocracy for a system of government wherein a small pathological minority takes control over a society of normal people. If an individual in a position of political power is a psychopath, he or she can create an epidemic of psychopathology in people who are not, essentially, psychopathic. Under such conditions, no area of social life can develop normally, whether in economics, culture, science, technology, administration, etc. Pathocracy progressively paralyzes everything. Learn more about our membership, access transcripts, and the art we use in the videos by visiting Academy of Ideas.
Okay, we're back, y'all. Now, we only have 4 minutes down here, and I want you to understand that because now we have the children going back to school, but I do want you to understand one thing. The powers that be in this country cannot afford to educate your children, because to do so properly, they will give them what it would take to rule over them, and they're not willing to do that. They're not going to teach you who you are and your identity and the fact that you are indigenous to this land. They're not going to tell you that they have no right to be on your land and tell you what the hell to do. They're not going to teach you that. They're going to teach you everything but that, and then they'll give you an award. They'll give you a diploma. They'll give you a college degree. Nothing in there about your identity, about your culture, about your ancient story, and your ties to this land. They're not going to do that. They give you everything but that. They'll even give you cash money. Anything, everything to keep you in a state of suspended animation without the right information. So therefore, what you have to do is you have to get this information for yourself. Find out who you are. How you going to be honest with someone if you don't know who you are? And you're not willing to do an investigation on yourself and your own ancient story, your own ancient culture, your own ancient customs. You see, when people come from somewhere else and come into this country, they bring their culture with them. They bring their food with them. You go to a Chinese restaurant, a Mexican restaurant, you would think that if this is a restaurant in your community, that they will bring what you like to eat. No. They bring in their culture, their custom, and they're in a position to you either take it or leave it. If you don't like it, then we got a problem with you, because we're doing what you just done hundreds of years ago. But you still engaged in beliefs. You are still refusing to do the research on your own self and knowledge of self. If you're going to believe in something, why don't you believe in you? I'll put it to you like that. But nevertheless, we come to the close of the broadcast. And I hope y'all got something out of this. Keep in mind, it's just part one. And don't forget we're going to convert this thing over into a video. When you get over there to YouTube, go ahead and subscribe to the channel so you can make sure that you're able, if you're working or whatever, and you can't catch the live broadcast, you can always go back and listen to the broadcast. Even though I'm going to be putting it out, if you don't catch it then, you can always go over there and check out the broadcast. Okay? I've been your host, Tarhaka Amana El Bay. Until next time, y'all have a good evening. Okay?
When we come to work in the morning, we don't think about all the money we've won against big tobacco, big pharma, or the insurance industry. That's in the past. Life faces forward, and so do we. It's been said, to live in the past is to die in the present. What really matters is what we can do for you and your family right now, right this second. So call us, Farah and Farah, here for you, here for good. Gainesville. We've seen it 1,000 times. Insurance companies using the same tired excuses not to pay. They'll say you're really not hurt, or that your injury is from an old accident. That's why it's so important to hire a law firm who has their own medical experts, who know how to fight excuses with facts. When they bring excuses, we bring the truth, and truth is power. Farah and Farah, here for you, here for good. Jacksonville.